Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. All right, Tyler Gould, here we are. Thursday night, back in the lab.
Mike Freeman, Thursday night, one of my favorite nights of the week, man.
Season 2 rolls along, and this week's guest is Morgan Jones. You and I know Morgan Jones. We don't know Morgan Jones as a friend. We know her as we respect the work that she does. She's a podcast host. LDS Living has a podcast called All In, established in 2018. We learned tonight, and Morgan Jones is the host of that podcast. We love that podcast, and we actually reached out to her, and she answered our email. Can you believe that?
I can't believe it. I mean, I've got relatives that don't answer my emails, so you know.
And I've been tempering my enthusiasm all night. You will hear, folks, listeners, you will hear a cool, calm Mike Freeman, right, going through and having a conversation with Morgan Jones like we have with all these other episodes. The whole time I've been ecstatic because I really do like the work that she does. And the idea that she would jump onto our podcast. She's got 5 million downloads, brother.
Yeah, she's got just a couple more than we do, but you know, but it was fun, man. I had a good time with her tonight. I think that, you know, she's super smart. She's very insightful. She, you know, she had some great quotes that she dropped on us tonight. She gave us kind of a taste of our own medicine. You and I are always throwing quotes around. And she was quick on the draw. So it was great, man.
Yeah. And our listeners are going to want to grab some of those quotes. That Mother Teresa quote, forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it. She's a Tar Heel fan. She reveals that, even though there was a little, you know, gentleman deal that no college basketball would be discussed because I'm a Duke fan. She went there. I let her go there because she's the guest, right?
Yeah, right.
What do you think our listeners are going to dig about their time listening to Morgan?
Well, I thought she gave us some great insights into being intentional and to applying lessons that we come across in our lives and trying to make adjustments. You know, she spent some time talking about some of the guests that she's had on her show and some of the things that they taught her. And she went down, she rattled off this list of things that she's changed because of what people have said when she's had conversations with them. And really that's sort of the intent of this show too, Mike, right? Is that we can sit down, have some conversations. Hopefully we're all, including the listeners, being a little introspective and saying, wait a second, where can I apply that to me? And look, I have a couple pages of things that I wrote down that she said. Most of them are book titles and authors I need to jump on, but there's a lot of great nuggets in there. So it was a blast. What stood out to you tonight, Mike, with Morgan?
Well, I think it's appropriate because her work kind of caught our attention, and she speaks about that love of her work. She really speaks, and you kind of get a Gavin Spencer vibe, right? Like Morgan Jones might be doing what Morgan Jones was born to do.
Yeah.
She talked from an early age of just, you know, kind of dreaming of interviewing people. She would practice interviewing herself, and, you know, here I am giving away the show. But like, I think that work shows. It shows in the product. It shows in the impact that she's having. Really kind of inspired me to continue to do the work that we're doing. We talk with Morgan, kind of podcast host to podcast host, about what it is like to learn from other people's lives and how we might be able to apply some of those things. And man, some of the things that we lead into into the conversation as she joins us, talking about, what's the bravest thing you've ever done?
Yeah.
Tyler, I think that's some of the coolest conversation that we've had on or off the air.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Just that life of action, and how, when we get an opportunity to be brave, and maybe we swing and miss, maybe we don't even swing. How great would it be to reflect on that and commit to be brave the next time?
Yeah.
And I think Morgan jumps right in, and like we've been hanging out for years.
Yeah, I thought that was a great moment on the show, and I loved her answer about talking about her faith and sort of her journey in faith, and it's very different than our other guests that we've had on the show, and I think it's different but just as valuable, and I think there's a lot of things to be learned from her or our conversations about faith with Morgan.
I just want to kind of emphasize what you just said. As our listeners listen in on Morgan's experience, we want to make sure that we validate that experience, and it's just as powerful.
Yeah,
it's just as powerful. She talks about, always being a believer. That's just as powerful as the person who has a newfound faith.
Amen. Yeah.
And I really appreciate. As always, the magic in this show is the show up.
Yeah.
She took our work to heart. She reflected on the questions, and she came in a spirit of willingness to share and willingness to let us in. And therein lies the power. So our folks are going to love this episode of Morgan Jones. We're excited to share it with you. We do want to thank Morgan, and we will be able to connect our listeners to her work as we drop some of the things that she makes reference to into the show notes. Everybody grab a piece of paper, because it's not about what she says, it's about what you do with what she says, as always, right? So we've got some notes, we've got some challenges, we got some things that we're going to do. Enjoy this episode of The Richest Men in Town with Morgan Jones. Okay, so the obvious, just the brain dead definition of courage is like everything that looks bold and daring, adventurous in life. I'm like, that looks like a trip to the emergency room. That looks like something that's just not safe, right? Like I should be an insurance adjuster. Right.
But let me ask you this, because your personality is not that. So how do you square the feeling of not courageous with the personality of Mike Freeman?
See, I don't know, because I've led you in on some pretty epic fails, right? Where life has given me an opportunity to be courageous, and I shrink.
Yeah.
And I think that the beautiful thing is life's going to keep serving those up until you can step up into that space and do something with it, right? But yeah, man, I admire the courageous. In my mind, I got that man in the arena quote written there, right? Like, daring greatly, like get in there and do it. And I think professionally, I'm all about that. Personally, I'm a pretty comfortable Christian, man. I think in the past with previous episodes, we've talked about this cloud of Christian comfort.
Yeah.
And we're there, but I'm not John Taylor getting out of my car and going up to the homeless guy and praying with him, right?
Yeah.
I want to be.
So what's stopping you?
Here's the thing. I was having this conversation with my kids the other night, and I was mopping the other day. Mopping is very therapeutic, Tyler. I don't know. I don't know if you're a mopper.
No, I'm really not. I mean, I do mop, but I don't enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay. I am like the mopper of the family, and mopping to me and mowing gets me in the same mode, right? The same mental mode.
Yeah.
very introspective as I'm mopping.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, temptation only is powerful if what's on the other end of it matters to you. If you want to reduce the power of temptation in your life, turn down the import of what it's trying to tempt you to do. And so many of my flaws are aimed at the fact that I care what other people think about me.
Okay.
So when I make a joke, it may be off color because I'm trying to be funny because I want people to like me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When I'm challenged with being true to who I am in a setting where I might be the only member of my church, I can go chameleon real quick because I want people to like me. I can go Peter like nothing, right? Peter denying Christ like 3 times. I can go there. I shouldn't be laughing, but I can go there quick. And it's because that dial on what I think people think of me is turned way up. Right?
Is that on both sides of the scale? You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I can turn it way up, right? When I'm in a congregation.
Yeah.
Because again, I want people. So in that case, it could be a strength, but like really getting down into what trips me up a lot of times is what other people think about me.
Well, look, the reality is you're not alone on that, right? I mean, that's human nature. I mean, we walk into a room and you're immediately looking for the comfort zone, right? And the comfort zone is anybody that you know. And then to make that comfort zone even more comfortable is to blend with those people, right? And to become those people. So that's the comfort zone. I mean, you know, the
but
question,
courage.
Yeah, that right.
Valiancy and courage is that I'm here. I have the courage to stand alone, right? Yeah. I'll stand up. If I see somebody getting picked on, if I see somebody getting bullied,
yeah,
right? Courage is like, nope, that's wrong. That's against my code. I can't stand for that. I will say something right here, right now.
And you will do that.
I think I will do that because I also love people, right? And I think kindness and compassion, somewhere in there's some covenants to follow the Savior, right?
Yeah.
And stand as a witness at all times.
Right.
But you know, you shared this quote, right? Like, man, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
You got it?
I do have it. It says a soft, easy life is not worth living. It impairs the fiber of brain and heart and muscle. We must dare to be great. We must realize that greatness is the fruit of toil and sacrifice and high courage. For us is the life of action, of strenuous performance of duty. Let us live in the harness, striving mightily. Let us rather run the risk of wearing out than rusting out.
And you send that to me and you ask the question, are you living in the harness?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think maybe I asked you that question because I was wondering for myself, am I living in the harness? You know, I think that courage is an interesting word, you know, because I think when we think about it, you know, my mind goes to these great people in history who accomplished great things, you know. But sometimes, Mike, I think courage is the willingness. You know, sometimes we do get into the crowd. We walk into the crowd and we blend, and then we see something that's not squaring with who we are, and we say something. And I will say this for those who are listening to this podcast that don't know Mike Freeman like I know Mike Freeman. I've been in those situations with Mike Freeman, who has done the courageous thing. You know, now I think you and I, we have a tendency to want to peer into our own souls and take stock of where we should be. And there's, to me, that's a double-edged sword, right? Because when we become introspective, it's easy to start stacking up the things that we think we're short on.
Well, because who's the measuring stick?
Right.
Like when you look in your heart, when you look in your soul, who do you want to be like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we put ourselves,
even as I am, right?
Right.
We want to
put
be
ourselves up with the Savior, right?
Right. And
That's
we want to be that.
Yeah.
And we don't, and I will say this too. I love your other thought, because we want to be that all the time.
Yeah.
And you said like earlier that human nature is, there's variance. There's variance in us at all times. At my very best, someone might look at me and be like, man, that guy reminds me of Jesus Christ. I'd kind of like to be like that guy. At my very worst, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that sort of nuance of who we are is the reality. Look, let me tell you something, man. A while ago, I was in a situation at a work event, and I was having a conversation with some people, and they were talking about going out for a drink, right? And I obviously I excused myself. No thanks. Appreciate the offer. Not going to join you. They asked me why, Mike, and I gave them some whys. Okay.
Hold on, give them to me. What was it?
Dude, I don't even remember. They're terrible. I don't remember, but they weren't reality.
They weren't because you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ.
They weren't because I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I live the word of wisdom, right? So I walked away, and I walked into my office, and I started doing something, and it was chewing at me, man. And so I walked back into the group. I go, hey, listen, guys, I got to tell you something. I wasn't upfront with you. This is why I'm not going.
There we go.
Now, it was painful. What would have been easier, Mike, was to be courageous in the moment, right? In the moment. But sometimes we have to shrink a little bit to realize that, hey, you know what? I probably need to be, and we know when
let me tell you,
we know.
Let me tell you two stories.
Yeah.
One, my high school son, Abe Freeman, junior, right?
Right.
Junior in high school, has the keys to the stake center, gonna play some ball.
Right.
Gonna play some ball with some people that are not members of the church. They start playing some ball and some language gets used.
Yeah.
Stops the game. Stops the game and in front of his peers says, hey guys, it's my church. Right? Like, we're not going to use that kind of language. Right? There's no way Mike Freeman at 16 years old would have done that. Let me tell you this story.
Okay.
I'm married maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
When we got married, we left town. Kelly canceled a gym membership. The gym membership forgot to cancel it. It was one of those automatic withdrawal things, right?
Right.
So we moved, different banks, whatever. They can't get their payment. 3 months of that, 4 months of that. My wife's name, bless her heart, gets sent to a collection agency.
Yeah.
The phone rings. I pick it up. This guy lights into me about my wife. Says things like, you probably need to make a better choice of like who you marry.
Whoa.
What do I say?
What did you say, Mike?
Okay, thanks, sir. We'll go ahead and get this thing cleared up. What?
Okay, but listen,
can you get some freaking courage?
All right, so there's two thoughts that come to mind. All right, one is I want to go back to Abe for a second, playing ball in the church, because I think you and I have said those things as adults in those situations?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. As a 16-year-old, that's crazy. But here's the beautiful thing is that Abe sees the model of courage in you now, and he's doing that now when he's 16. Right? I don't know that, like, for me at 16, yeah, that wasn't going to happen. I was rolling with
it.
it.
Yeah, Abe's totally on a different track because I think he's making choices that are going to help him flex that muscle early. And right?
That doesn't surprise me at all when you tell that story about Abe, by the way. I mean, that's like exactly what I would have expected from Abe.
Okay, well, let me set myself up big time and ask the question, does the story about me and the collector on the phone surprise you at all?
Yeah, it does surprise me, dude. That does surprise me. I will chalk that up to youthful, you're married and you're scared and collection sounds nasty. So you shrank a little bit. All right.
I shrank so much.
We know a few things now. So I know how you feel about Kelly. So,
yeah, you know what? That guy doesn't.
He doesn't, but if he's listening and he wants to call back to the Freeman home, I'm sure you'd have a different response.
All right. Hey, so Tyler, bravery, courage. We've got Morgan Jones coming. Morgan Jones is the host of one of our favorite podcasts. LDS Living has a podcast called All In, and Morgan Jones is going to be our guest. She is the host of All In, so we're excited to have her on there. We're going to talk a little bit about her work, get to know her, lots of things that we admire about the work that she's doing through that podcast. And maybe, we'll get some tips on how to be decent podcast hosts. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that can help us, but we'll listen. Right.
Yeah, right. I'm wondering if while I press the admin button here for Morgan Jones, Tyler, could you look back on your life and answer the question, what's the bravest thing you've ever done?
Oh, man.
What is the bravest thing you've ever done? We'll do that as a setup.
All right. Sounds good. That sounds good. What's going on, Morgan? How are you?
Hello. How we doing?
Fantastic.
We're doing well. Welcome to the richest men in town. How are you?
I am doing great. How's the conversation been thus far? What did I miss?
Oh, man, I was super exposed and vulnerable. Tyler has been relatively playing it safe, but I did ask him the question. So we are talking about courage and bravery.
Okay.
Right? You can't talk about courage and bravery and daring greatly without a good Teddy Roosevelt quote. So Tyler Gould, do you have that quote at the ready?
I do have the quote. Are you ready for this, Morgan?
I'm ready.
Hold on. Right. Before the quote,
Okay.
Before we let you in, Morgan, I did just pose the question to Tyler Gould. What is the bravest thing he's ever done?
Oh boy. Okay.
And I'm curious.
That's a doozy. And so I'm going to read this. And while I'm reading, I'm going to be trying to figure something out. So, all right.
You want me to read it? And you can think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. From Teddy Roosevelt. A soft, easy life is not worth living if it impairs the fiber of brain and heart and muscle. We must dare to be great, and we must realize that greatness is the fruit of toil and sacrifice and high courage. For us is the life of action, of strenuous performance of duty. Let us live in the harness, striving mightily. Let us rather run the risk of wearing out than rusting out. Whew.
That's a doozy.
That is a doozy. When I think of like living in the harness, so I grew up in Red Bluff, California. Morgan Jones has no idea what Red Bluff, California is.
It sounds like a great place.
It's pretty great. Yeah.
It is a town of about 11,000. When I was there, it's still 11,000 people, but they had the claim to fame for Red Bluff was the largest 2-day rodeo in the world.
Okay.
Right? So cowboy country. And when I hear living in the harness, I think of that guy who's strapped to the bull and they strap him in and they're about to open the chute. Right? And so that would be the backdrop for my question to you, Tyler Gould. When have you ever felt that? When is the bravest thing you've ever done?
I mean, if we're gauging bravery by hopping on the back of a bull and being let go out of a chute, I have done nothing in my life that requires bravery. All right. If that's the measurement.
Okay,
But
maybe it's inappropriate.
But I will say this. I think the bravest thing that I have done is probably, it has to do with decisions that I've made in my life to live my life a certain way. You know, I made a choice when I was 18, 19 to serve a mission. In my household, that was a difficult choice, right? So there were some difficulties to make that. And then just to continue down that path for me is probably the bravest. And now I could lump everything in, right? My kids, my home, everything else is tied to those decisions. So that's where I'm going with my bravest choice. Now, again, if you said, Tyler, that sounds great, but this dude was on the back of a bull.
Oh, it's right there.
I got
honestly.
nothing, man. So
In some of those circumstances, you feel the same.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
I remember I'm holding a wedding ring in my hand, and I'm sweating, right? And I'm like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, right? I just had the conversation with her dad, like, and he's like, how are you going to take care of her? And I'm like, I got this. I'm selling boxes. I'm making $7 an hour. She's going to be treated like a queen, Howard. Relax. Right. But
Bless Howard for taking a chance on you, you know.
Oh, Morgan, you have no idea what kind of chance they took. You have no idea. That's a whole nother episode. But that's like, I'm on a bull, right? That chute's about to open, and it's going to be like, maybe this thing is a ball of flames and we're out in 2 seconds, and maybe we go 8 seconds and we look like we know what we're doing, right? But I mean, I think that you're not far off with those moments, right? I think of when the airplane door opened and I'm in Uruguay.
Right.
I'm serving a mission, and I've been a member of the church like a year and a month, right? A year and a couple of months. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't speak the language. I just know that Jesus Christ changed my life, and I kind of want to do that for other people.
Well, and I will say this, if we go back to the quote by Teddy Roosevelt, the thing that stands out to me, I mean, there's a lot of things, right? But the whole striving mightily, like, to me, that's the courage part, right? Because the easy thing would be to sit on the bull for a second and be like, you know what, this is a dumb idea, I'm out, right? And to bail out. But I think the courage to just keep plodding forward, you know, even given some of the stuff that happens in life.
I love that life of action. But Morgan, enough about us.
Yeah.
Morgan Jones, we're curious. You jump into the conversation. We're trying to give you a little bit of like what our crazy brains have been up to the last 5 minutes. For you, when I say the bravest thing in your life, where does that take you?
I'm going to say, I think Tyler's example, the example of going on a mission that was scary. I think the very first time that I tried to teach a lesson in Spanish, also terrifying. I still remember a Cuban family. I had no idea. Hold on.
Where were you?
I was in Kennewick, Washington.
Okay.
So stateside Spanish. But we had an appointment that night with a Cuban family, and I could not understand a thing they were saying. And my trainer from my mission, her family is Cuban. So they were speaking her kind of Spanish.
They were just jamming.
And I thought, man, I will never speak Spanish as well as she does. But then I'd say, like, in addition to that, I think, you know, Tyler, you make a very valid point in the sense that everything after that, I think our lives are kind of a life of ease for the most part growing up. Fortunately for me, I guess. Sure. I shouldn't say that that's the case for everybody.
Right.
But my life was a life of ease. And then I think once I got home from my mission, it was like a matter of making big decisions. And then in my case, I've been single a lot longer than I anticipated and have had to do a lot of things by myself. Like, buy my first car, and I live 2,000 miles away from my family. So like doing what felt like risky things all on my own, I think has taken on kind of its own form of bravery.
That's huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea because those subsequent brave experiences you chose.
Right.
Right. You could have gone to a comfortable place.
Right.
But instead you're choosing, like Tyler, last week's guest, Carol, choosing challenge.
Yeah.
Right. In the face of all of these things. Like, so I'm holding the ring. I asked the girl to marry me. She says, yes. I got to go talk to my mom about getting married in the temple. And she's not a member.
Right.
Right.
I think
those choices.
Yeah. I like that idea though, of like choosing, because maybe I've thought in the past that challenges chose me, and the reality is I like the idea of choosing our challenges. I think that shifts the narrative a little bit. Right. I mean, I think it's empowering if we say, hey, I'm willing to take this on, as opposed to this thing is controlling me.
Right. Kind of take your power back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm even thinking of like how the challenge does sometimes choose us. I mean, sometimes things happen to us, but how we respond. I remember, a couple of years ago, we had, every year, it seems like wildfires kind of ravaged my home here in Northern California. A couple of years ago, I'm a superintendent of a school district, and 35 homes go up in flames. And I've got to stand up in front of a gym full of parents and start rebuilding.
Right.
And like, here, Mike, here's the mic. We're ready. And it's like, I'm on a bull. It's that same feeling, right? Like, how is this going to go? Let's just lead in and take that action. Right.
But yeah, I think, Mike, too, that at the end of the day, I think we're not just the three of us, okay, but everybody who's listening, we're braver than we give ourselves credit for.
Well,
right?
We have to warn Morgan, there are thousands of people.
Eventually.
that might actually listen to our podcast. So yeah.
Well, I agree. It's funny that you said that, Tyler, because I was literally having that exact same thought, that we don't give ourselves enough credit for how brave we actually are. Yeah. And that every day, we're faced with things that require bravery. And so maybe it's not strapping yourself to the back of a bull, but it gives you that same feeling and it requires the same amount of courage. So, and maybe not as much of an adrenaline rush, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Well, and other people looking at us are like, wow, look at her, right? Other people looking at us and looking at the choices in the life that we're trying to lead. I think before you came on, Morgan, we talked a little bit about that variance and how sometimes we are amazing and sometimes we are just not that great.
Well, you know what's funny, Mike, is that I was having a conversation with someone a few years ago, and they were talking about coming into church late. We're always coming into church late. My kid's hair is wet and there's no seats in the chapel. And we walk to the front of the chapel. We have to sit in front of everyone. Everyone's looking at us, judging us, saying, these people don't have their act together. And the person talking to me said, I'm looking at all these people who have it together. And I just remember I was telling her, I said, what's
you looking
about that? Yeah. What's interesting is all those people are watching you walk in with your 5 kids to the front of the chapel, sitting down, and they're probably going, how does she do it? Like, I wish I could be like that. Right. It's like the perspective of where we're at, right? We always look at everyone else and say, they've got it, they've got it together. And here I am floundering, but the reality is, to Morgan's point, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for what we're capable of, what we do, and the bravery that we have.
Well, I want to drill down on that, but first I want to share, when you shared that Teddy Roosevelt quote with me, I thought life of action. And number one, I kind of came down on myself a little harshly because my life doesn't feel like it has a whole lot of action in it right now. But that's the thought that came to me was actually from Hunter S. Thompson. And this guy's a Hell's Angel. So let's qualify that, right? It's not every day I quote a Hell's Angel. He says this: life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in, broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride.
That's
right?
good.
Like, that is so great.
That is good.
Like, that's what we want. We want to be worn out. I mean, ideally worn out in service of others and those kinds of things, but like, you've got one run, right? My son,
Yeah,
my son last night, we were talking, you know what he starts his runs with?
Tell
Red
me.
Hot Chili Peppers, Can't Stop. I said, I love that. He said, man, the intro of that song, Dad, that just gets me going. And then he's like, and you know what? I really like that last line. I heard it. You mentioned it in one of your podcast episodes, right? Can't stop the spirits when they need you. This life is more than just a read through. And I'm like, man, if you're a 16-year-old and you understand that this life is more than just a read through, I'm investing all in, man. I'm all in on that kid. No pun intended, Morgan Jones. No pun.
I'm all in on Abe too. Let him know. I'm all in, man. That kid is something else.
Right? You get one run. Let's lay this thing down at the end and say, wow, what a ride. Life of action. That strenuous life of Teddy Roosevelt.
I like it, man.
But on the subject of judging ourselves.
Yeah.
Tyler, can you bring up that Beecher quote? The one you sent me right before.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me get back to it. All right. Here it says, we should not judge people by their peak of excellence, but by the distance they have traveled from the point where they started.
Man, if we could just remember that, right? Before you came on, Morgan, I shared a really lousy example of me not being courageous. I was married 1 or 2 years and I had a chance to defend my wife and I didn't. Super bad.
There's some context that is completely missing from that.
Right the end result,
it sounds
I got a
awful,
guy
but
criticizing my wife, saying untruths about my wife, and I just say, "Thank you, sir, for your time. We'll get that thing worked out." Right? Like, come on, I should have cussed or something, right? Or, hey, I'll meet you at the corner store and we'll fight.
You really should have. That would have been this could have been a very different podcast.
Well, Morgan, I am one person on this podcast that has never punched somebody in the face. I'll say that. I don't know about the other two, but I've never punched anybody in the face.
I have never punched anyone in the face. I did once throw a shoe at my sister's head in the car. That was maybe my lowest moment in life.
Well, that's funny, Morgan, because I think my mom threw a shoe at my head in a car so there's that. But
the purpose of the podcast, Morgan, is not to get you to the lowest point in your life in the first 5 minutes.
Well, we're already here. So there's nowhere to go but up.
That's right. Yep, that's right. That's perfect. Well, look, Morgan, let's talk for a second about, because we do have listeners and Mike and I are fans of your podcast, All In.
Well,
we love it. We think that you do a great work. When I listen to it, I learn something, and that's what I'm looking for when I'm listening to things. Right? I want to be able to somehow have something that's going to prompt me to take action, right, and do something different. And your podcast does that. And so Mike and I are fans of that. But for those people who haven't had the opportunity to listen to All In, how would you describe your show to those that aren't aware of it?
So All In, and just for the record, you guys can make as many All In puns as you want during the course of this episode. We like to do that in our office a lot. But All In is an interview style podcast where we talk about it's not always a topic that's related to faith. Sometimes it's an experience that someone's had, but talking about it from a place of faith. And then at the end of every episode of the podcast, we always ask the same question, which is, what does it mean to you to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
I love it. So how long have you been doing the podcast now?
We launched in October of 2018. So almost 2.5 years.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you've had some really, some great guests on the show. I mean, you've talked to all kinds of different people. I mean, what are some takeaways for you in spending some time with the people that you have?
Oh man, I could talk about that all day long, but I think one of the biggest things that I've learned from it is just that I think so many times we do ourselves a disservice by thinking that somebody else is going through something completely different than us. And so there's no opportunity to relate. And in reality, I've seen with this podcast, because we talk to all different kinds of people, and at the root, the principles that they're learning seem to be the same. And for me, like, that's been really refreshing to realize, because I think there's Patricia Holland talks about how we put up like artificial barriers between each other based on our circumstance. And I just think that is so true. And if we could break down those walls, the difference that it would make, I think, in people's lives, but especially in regard to their experience within their faith, would be powerful. And because at the root, our identity, the most important identity that we have, I believe, is our identity as children of God and disciples of Jesus Christ. And so all those other things are just ancillary.
Yeah.
But that's at the root, and that's the thing we all have in common. So why are we so focused on marital status or race or the amount of money that you make? I just don't think those things matter very much in the grand scheme of things. So
there's so many similarities when I hear you talk about your podcast and the project and the work that you're doing, because I think that we've had, okay, so we're not established in 2018. We're like established a couple months ago, but the idea is the same. There have been moments on this podcast, and I'm sure you can relate, where I wish the whole world was hearing what our guest was saying, right? That the principle that the guest was teaching through life experience could really open up our eyes, and we could treat each other differently.
Yeah.
And kind of unintentionally, Tyler and I have really taken up almost like a crusade, where there's just some things that we do. Now we have listeners that are members of various churches. We have people that that may not even attend church. That may not even be people of faith. But the idea is that sometimes we don't intend to, but man, we get in the way of good things happening because of some of these structures that we have in place.
Right. And what's interesting too, Mike, he describes some of the people that we've had on this show, and we have had people from all different religious backgrounds and some who would not consider themselves religious, I guess you would say. But the interesting thing is, in every conversation that we've had, faith is right there, right? It's been like a core part of every interview that we've done, even for those that maybe start out going, yeah, well, I'm not really, religious. But at the end of it, they have there's this yearning, right? Of, wait a second, or this maybe this beginning of an understanding of, there's something bigger than what I am.
Yeah.
Than what I think is there. Right.
Yeah. We had one episode of the podcast with a man named Stephen Collis, who is an attorney. And he wrote a book called True Conviction. And the book is all about religious freedom. And one of the most interesting points to me in his book is he talks about different cases that deal with religious freedom. But one of them was an atheist. And he said, even being an atheist is a belief. And religious freedom protects even that. And so I think it's important to realize, like, everybody has beliefs. Everybody has things that mean a lot to them. And we have to be respectful of those beliefs. And we also have to recognize that, again, that's another thing where I think we're all more the same than we are different.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like that at the bottom of this podcast, when we go sift through everything, I just feel like I walk away feeling like, man, we are a lot more similar than we are different, right?
Yeah.
No matter what our background is. And And I think that's important for us to understand, especially we live in this time where we want to have everyone placed in these boxes and have labels put on everything, right? So we can say, well, this guy's this, and this woman is that, and this person is this. And it makes things, maybe that makes things easier, because then we can just we can dismiss things because we've labeled them, but I think if we get to that point where we can take those labels away and just say, let's just have a conversation, and let's just understand who we are. And let me tell you where I think we're going, because I think at the end of the day, that conversation is leading the same direction. Whoever.
I love Morgan's point about identity.
Yeah.
Right. Because in the end, that it all boils down to that. And we've talked to people, and their journey is amazing. I mean, the resiliency of the human spirit and what people can go through and what people can endure. But as they're going through these trials, all of the other things seem to kind of be stripped away. And we'll have people say, you know what, while all this was going on, Mike, I wasn't going to church, but I believed. Right. And it's almost like we have this mental model where if you're not going to church, then you don't believe. It's like, that's so not true. Right?
And beyond that too, Mike, it was, I'm not going to church and I'm doing some pretty rotten things in my life. And yet I felt the Spirit calling
I'm getting answers
to get back to things, right? There was this constant pull of let's make some corrections.
Yeah. And I think that if we recognize that we're more the same than we are different, then it's not that these other parts of our identity don't matter, because they do.
Sure.
And so I'm not saying that these other elements of who you are irrelevant, but I think when you strip it down and you get down to those core identities and you recognize that you have that in common, then all these other parts, you're more willing to listen and try to understand, because you recognize that we're all brothers and sisters really at our core. And then you care more, right? You care more to listen and to hear them out. And I mean, I've had the experience in the last couple of years for circumstances related to faith between myself and my siblings to change a ton. And I have been amazed by how much I love them so much that I will do anything to understand, and I will do anything to love them better. And it just has been a really eye-opening experience to me. And I think that they are my siblings, blood siblings.
Right.
But if I loved everybody like that, I would listen a lot better. I would seek to understand more than I seek to be understood, and all these other things. So
yeah, I love that.
Well, and there's been times when Tyler and I have looked at each other after an episode where we're getting into someone's life, and it's just that unscripted life, right? It's just the richness of life. People have plans and then stuff happens. But the great thing about that is as Tyler and I finish up with that individual, we almost get this on to the next. Who else is great in my life that I don't even know has a great story? And how can I just be intentional? Thursday night is my most intentional. It's the most intentional 2 hours of my life, because we stop, we look someone in the eye and we ask questions, and with the sole intent of listening to understand. And I think that our world is missing that. I read something the other day. It's not like in the world, it's not like I want to say my opinion. I want you to say my opinion. That's the problem. I want you to believe like me. And so I'm going to turn it up, and I'm just going to get more loud versus, the counterintuitive, the Christ-like thing is to minister, is to go where they are, listen to what they're dealing with, and then hopefully we're filled with compassion and we feel compelled to do something about it.
For sure.
So Morgan, when Mike and I started doing this, and this is the confessional portion of the show. All right. So when Mike and I started doing this, it was literally about, hey, let's just talk to people and we'll learn from them how we can be better. It was like a completely selfish venture, right? Like we will just talk to people. They'll tell us how they've done things good. We will try to implement those things and that'll be great. Right.
Yeah.
But as we've gone through, I think that has shifted a little bit because I feel like not only am I hearing a lot of things that I need to do to be better, but I'm learning from different people. I think Mike talks about intentionality. I feel like sitting down and really being focused on, what has this person gone through and how can I understand them? And then how can we connect on a deeper level has been super powerful for me to do this show. But what I'm wondering from you, Morgan, is what are you taking away from the time that you spend with the people that you sit down with on All In? I mean, are there things that you've heard that you said, you know what, that's something I've got to put into action?
Oh yeah. I feel like there are things all the time that I could probably go through the list of episodes and be like, and that's what I learned from that one.
Right.
But I think that first of all, I think that you make an incredible point and I actually haven't thought of it that way, that it's an exercise in intentionality, but that is what it is. And I think for me, it has been life-changing in being able to sit down, ask somebody questions. I think I have this theory that that's one reason that people love podcasts, because everybody wishes that they could sit down and have an excuse to just immediately dive deep with somebody.
Totally. Right.
There was a man when I was at Deseret News, I wrote a story about this man who had passed away, and he had all of these little phrases that he would say. And one of them was go deep fast. And I love that. And it was actually, you guys as Californians will appreciate this because it was based on Jerry Rice, because they would go to 49ers games and they'd be like, man, he just goes deep so fast. And so he was like, go deep fast. Greg Madsen was that guy's name. And I just think that's such a good way to live your life, but it's hard to do that. And so I think for me, the podcast gives me an opportunity to go deep very fast. And so in terms of like what I've learned, I've gotten really into meditation as a result of the podcast, because we did a handful of episodes about meditation and I ended up doing like a 50-day meditation challenge. I think I made it like 75 days in the end, but then fell off the wagon. But It was super, super good for me. And then I think, there's all kinds of things, the way that I approach trials, I think is different, because hearing about other people's trials puts yours in perspective. The way that I study the scriptures, I think, is a little bit different as a result. My understanding of different doctrines has changed. And so I don't think, like I said, I really do think I could probably go down the list and be like, and that was my takeaway from that one. But those are some things that come to mind.
It's interesting because, I'm listening to you talk about go deep fast, which I totally love that. Like, and it's funny because, how many times we've asked people to come on the show and they've said to us right up front, like, I've got nothing to offer you guys. I'll do it as a favor, but I got nothing. Right. And then we spent some time and it's like, man, the richness of that life and, all that they've accomplished and all that they've done, it just seems that, if we could figure out, you talk about people love podcasts because they're somehow jealous of the opportunity to sit down and like dive deep into things. I think, man, that's where we connect, right? That's where we connect. At the end of the day, we walk by people on the street and say, how you doing? They say, fine. Right. And we're all, and maybe sometimes we're like, whoo, they just said fine. So that's cool. So we can just keep going.
Yeah.
But if they actually told us what was happening, man, we would treat each other differently if that was the case.
Well, I love the meditation too, because what you're doing in meditation is, and just those mindfulness exercises is you're going deep with yourself.
For sure.
And we've talked about that before, how nobody really wants to hear what self has to say these days. Because so we cloud our life with noise. The self knows what we need. We don't want to tune into that. And so, I think that that's one of the great things that Tyler and I know we've had moments where we're sitting here and we're listening to somebody. I'm 100% in my business as I'm listening to that person, right? They've got me in a place where I'm introspective, and it's like, oh my goodness, this guy is talking to me right now. And it's really personal revelation. It's really just that Holy Ghost saying, hey, you listen to this, right? This guy's got something, or this lady's got something to teach you. Tyler talks about our selfish venture here. The other thing we were looking to do, and to a person, this has happened. We are huge fans of George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. There's a moment.
As am I.
All right.
Good, Morgan.
It is a prerequisite. Actually, it isn't. We've had people on the show that don't even know who George is or have never seen the movie.
Which is just so sad.
It's ridiculous.
Those episodes have never aired. So.
Yeah, you're like, you're out.
Right. They're in the forgotten files.
Right.
But we are looking for that, because they all come in humble and they all come in like not sure they have anything to offer. And we're looking for that moment when almost like a light bulb, and you can see it in their eyes, and they realize, oh my goodness, I've got it pretty good. I've got this, I've got that, right? Where George Bailey's on the bridge and he just wants to live. He wants to go back to that life. He wants to go back to that drafty old house. And we've had moments on the show where you could almost pinpoint the moment in the episode when that happened. And that's what I love about the podcast format, right? And I really love about the work that we're doing. I'm curious though, you're from North Carolina.
Yes.
How does a girl, let's go back a little bit. How does a girl from North Carolina land on a podcast called All In and doing what you're doing now? So take me back a little bit. Growing up, parental influence. Talk to me about Morgan Jones as a kid.
So as a kid, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I think oldest children tend to be a little bit more serious by nature. And also I think oldest children, because you spend a lot of time with your parents initially, you kind of grow up a little bit groanier than you would be otherwise. And that was definitely true of me. I did not play with toys ever. And my parents talk about how I always wanted to participate in the conversations with the adults, which probably keeps me from having imposter syndrome now, because I've just been doing it my entire life. And I also used to interview myself in the bathroom mirror. That's not a joke. But I think I always imagined that I would become a famous singer or something like that. So I would be the one being interviewed, but I would be both the interviewer and the interviewee in these bathroom sessions. So I think that was probably a foreshadowing of things to come. But I grew up, I don't usually tell people this until we get to a certain level of friendship.
Go deep fast.
I was homeschooled.
All right.
Okay. And my mom, I would say that of all the school subjects, the one that my mom was the best at teaching was writing. And my mom is a really good writer herself, in my opinion. It's not like she goes and does anything with it, but every time that I read something that she writes, I'm like, wow, you're good. And so I think that naturally became my best subject in school. And so when I went to college, I had a professor. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Jeff Benedict, but he wrote the book, The Mormon Way of Doing Business, and he's written a bunch of other books. not really church related outside of that, but he was a professor at Southern Virginia University. I was a freshman and his class was a class for juniors and seniors, but I asked permission to take the class. I had taken some dual enrollment classes in high school. And so I was like, I've already taken college level writing classes. Could I get clearance to take these classes? And they said yes. And at the end of the semester, I had enjoyed his class so much that I was talking to my mom one night and I was like, this is somebody that I'd like to learn more from. And again, my mom in her wisdom said, well, you should ask him if he's ever considered having an intern. And so I did. And he had never had an intern before, I don't think. And to this day, I think he has had interns ever since, but he gave me the chance to kind of just shadow him for, I think I did it the next 2 semesters.
Wow.
And then ended up going to BYU. I worked in the athletic department there, writing and working in athletic media relations while I was in school. And then interned for church public affairs in Washington, D.C. That was a great experience. And it's kind of funny, like looking back on all of these things, they're all kind of different, but then they all kind of fit together in what I ended up doing. And then graduated and went on a mission, came back, and I had studied public relations at BYU. But when I got back, I took a job in PR and it just was not great. And so I was like, I got to get out of here. And I saw where Deseret News was hiring an intern, and somebody that I had known really well at Southern Virginia was then at Deseret News. And so I sent him a message and said, do you think that I might be qualified for this? In truth, I think I was way probably overqualified, but I always say I'm so grateful that I was in a really bad spot because it really humbled me. And I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified, but can you please give me this internship? I took a 50% pay cut to go and intern there. And it's funny, I still remember the first day that I went into Deseret News for an interview. It was like, it's funny because I just interviewed the church news editor, Sarah Weaver, and she talks about on the episode how the first day that she went and interviewed, she knew that her life had been changed forever, like that her life would never be the same. And I don't know if I knew that, but I knew that I was in a good place for me and I could feel it, like it was like palpable. And stayed there for 4.5 years and then came to Deseret Book, and they were launching a podcast and they asked me if I wanted to be involved with it. And I had kind of tried to start, which is a whole nother story. We had kind of tried to start a podcast at Deseret News and it never really got off the ground. And so I was like, sure, it'd be fun to have a podcast that actually sees the light of day. Right. And so we did it, and yeah, it's been great.
It's funny. Mike and I say that all the time. It'd be nice to have a podcast and see the light of day, but yeah.
Okay. I was going to make a self-deprecating joke about getting off the ground, but you know what?
No, I guys,
we're big. We're really big in Ireland.
I'm not talking people didn't listen. Like, I think that's what you're suggesting, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking the podcast was never heard by me outside of me and the producer that helped me with it.
I'm sure the producer is better for it, right? So
she's a saint because she really, I think, only did it as a favor to me. So
that's funny.
So when you walked into that Deseret News and you felt that, is it that you were doing what you were born to do? Maybe tapping into that girl interviewing herself in the mirror? Is that the vibe?
I don't think I connected any of those dots until way later. Yeah. I think it's funny too, when I was in high school, I read this quote by Mother Teresa that's been like my favorite quote ever. And it says, I am but a little pencil in God's hands. He does the writing. The pencil has only to be allowed to be used. And I loved that quote from the first time that I read it. And it kind of became a mantra. And it wasn't until probably 2 years ago that I was like, like I've literally had a chance. I mean, this was pre-podcast, right? And so at this point I had just been writing stories, but I was like, I feel like I literally have had the chance to be a little pencil. And I could go on about, I think there's a lot of different reasons that I like the term pencil rather than pen, but I think it just is funny the way God works. So
yeah. Okay, it is funny the way God works, because I'm 45 years old. I've never heard that quote before. And that quote's been in my head because we just had state conference.
Yeah.
And someone shared that quote.
Isn't it so good?
Oh my, I love that quote. I'm just a pencil in God's hand. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the idea too, Morgan. You mentioned, you said, I was in a spot in my life that I was humble, and it allowed me to kind of take this path with the pay cut and then yet you can look back on that and go, gosh, I'm grateful that, that I was in that spot,
At the time I was like, Heavenly Father, what are you doing to me?
Right.
Because I had gone on a mission. I was already older when I went on my mission. And so I had this very prescriptive idea of the way that things were going to go when I got home. Yeah. And they were not going that way at all. Like no aspect of my life was going well. And so, but now I look back and I'm like, Heavenly Father knew exactly what he was doing. And I honestly think I've relied so much on that because I can always look back to that experience and be like, he had me then, he's got me now. Like I can't see it entirely, but I know that he has got me. So I'm not worried.
Morgan, though, I just want to point out that sometimes people make choices and as people tell us their journey, it seems kind of ho-hum, right? I was miserable here. I had an opportunity here. I went there, took the pay cut. And that's like, oh, that wasn't, I just want to point out that took some courage. And there are folks that may be in that spot that might need an infusion of that courage to make that choice right now. They might be in a place that they're not doing their life's work. They might be making a decent dollar and they may be afraid of making a change because the dollar's decent, right?
Right.
But I think that I love the way you stepped us through that. And then we take a minute and we look back and you say, yeah, that was hard. And I'm asking Heavenly Father in prayer, what are you doing to me? I've talked to people that come back from their mission and they're like, God owes me, right? I served him and he owes me. And I'm just hanging out here waiting for it to come back. And it's like, you don't quite understand how this works, do you?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something, I think it's very common for us to be like, okay, I went and did this for this period of time, and now I'm expecting certain blessings.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the mission is the blessing. Like,
thank you. Yeah.
You got to serve a mission and your life was changed by that for a multitude of different reasons. And yeah, it was hard, but like, think of how many things you gained from that. And so the mission is the blessing.
Amen. Yeah.
When I think of that transactional, so many people have a transactional relationship or a transactional idea of who God is.
Right.
I do this happens. I do this, I get this. And it's like, no, sometimes we've talked to people that have leaned into that because they're doing the right thing and nothing is going right. And they have to really look in the mirror and say, do I believe in a God because blessings come, or do I believe in a God because he's there through it all?
Right.
And that's easy to say, but man, I've really been touched by people because to be brutally honest, that's something that I have to overcome. I don't hang on to this gospel of prosperity, but I know Heavenly Father knows me, and I know he sent me to South America because I needed people to listen to me. I couldn't go to France or Australia and do what he was asking me to do and me be the only convert,
Yeah. Well, and I think too, talking about the transactional God thing, I think that also creates some problems because it leads us to believe in kind of a fear-based gospel.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we think, oh, if I don't do this, then what's going to happen? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things where culturally it creeps in where we think, oh, if I don't do this, what will happen? And I just don't, that's not the God that I believe in. Yeah, and totally. I think we have to believe that God loves us so deeply that really the blessings, he wants to give us every blessing always. And the reason that we make these choices is because that's also a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to choose. So I don't know if I'm making any sense right now.
Absolutely.
But
no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, that idea of just trusting God because he's there. Mike talks about that. I think that culturally we do that tends to get in there where we talk about the blessings, we talk about the punishment, right? I think we undersell the idea of compassion and mercy and just the love of God. Like that's what permeates everything, right?
Right.
When I think of Doctrine and Covenants 121 right there at the end, without compulsory means, it'll flow. And I think that so many times if you're doing things because you're afraid that God is going to punish you if you don't, right? We do things and we've actually had recent conference talks on this, right? But we do things to become something. We're not virgins trying to stuff our, fill our lamps with oil because we're afraid that he's going to come and we're going to be unprepared, right? We want to do those things that are going to help us become who he will recognize when the Savior does come again.
Right.
And I think that gospel principle of becoming, doing to become, I've talked about it before. I think my early on just impressions coming into the church and in the gospel, it was like I do these things and I gather a point. It's almost like I'm a little Pac-Man running around doing good deeds and filling the ledger full of good things because I'm going to make withdrawals. And it's like, you're way wrong, Mike. You're way wrong. And Brad Wilcox, his grace is sufficient, right? That kind of flipped a switch for me. And I think it's important that we make sure that we acknowledge that it's almost better to not do it than to do it for the wrong reason in your heart, right? He knows the heart and he knows the mind. So Morgan, can I totally leave the script really quick?
Yeah, feel free, Mike.
Okay, it's half my show, right?
Yeah,
so
why not, man?
So we're talking to somebody who loves writing. I would love to know who somebody who loves writing enjoys reading.
Okay, so this is kind of a funny thing. I like reading a lot of different things. But if you asked me who is the writer that most influenced you and made you want to be a writer, aside from maybe people that I've worked with who definitely like Jeff Benedict, I actually had a friend who said that before she ever knew that I had any kind of connection to Jeff Benedict, and before she knew me, read my stuff in Deseret News and said that it reminded her of Jeff. And I was like, wow, that's, first of all, very impressive. But second of all, I'm flattered,
That's quite a compliment. Right. Yeah.
But when I was in middle school and high school, so I really, really hate to bring this up, Mike, but I am a diehard North Carolina Tar Heel fan.
Well, I thought we had a truce.
Well, Morgan. You asked this question.
You open the door, Mike. You take your medicine.
I asked about who you like reading, and here we are talking about Tar Heel basketball.
And it's going to tie in. Hang with me. It's going to tie in.
Smith wrote. That's the answer.
No, I do love his book, Carolina Way. It's a great one, but there's this guy that writes for the University of North Carolina website, athletic website, and his name is Adam Lucas. And I kid you not when I say that this man can make you cry writing about like the most mundane detail in a North Carolina basketball game. And I grew up reading his stuff. After every game, I would read whatever the column was that he wrote. And I just felt like he was a master. And so when I was at Southern Virginia, Burke Olson, who ended up being the person that helped me get the job at Deseret News, I was in his office one day and he asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd love to do something with writing. He said, who is somebody that you like their writing? And I said, Adam Lucas. He writes for the University of North Carolina basketball team. He really writes about football too. And Burke always, like for years, would bring that up because he's like, who?
Here I'm thinking Hemingway,
no,
Steinbeck.
No. Lucas.
Yeah.
Lucas.
Just you wait until you read one of the columns and you'll see what I'm talking about.
No,
Although it may be
so many ways. There's so many ways I can go with that, right? I can, North Carolina making you cry. I could bring up a couple of things, but
it may be a little bit emotionally manipulative if I'm being honest. And maybe that's the reason I like it, because everybody needs a good cry sometimes. But yeah, but I don't know. I like a lot of different people. I like how even some people that I feel like my style of writing is very different than some of the people that I really enjoy their writing, but I really like people that have a distinctive style in the way that they write. So
for the sake of show notes and for further people hear this podcast and they want to get to know your work, where can they catch up with some of your written work?
So I think if you search Morgan Jones Deseret News, it'll bring up some stuff. Although they've redesigned their website a couple of times, and I think every time some of my stuff gets lost in the mix. So I do think there's definitely plenty to keep people busy there. And I would just say I also managed all the web content. So some of the stuff is just like quick hit stuff, so just disregard that, but there's a good number of feature stories as well. And then LDS Living, same thing. If you search my name, it should bring up, and I can, if it's helpful, I can send you like a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, we'd love to connect people with that work.
Okay.
So I think we got thank you so much for kind of letting us in on that journey. Can you talk to me a little bit about mom and dad?
Yes.
My folks?
Parents are both from North Carolina, born and raised. My dad went on a mission to Arizona, but aside from that, they have always lived in North Carolina. And on my mom's side of our family, so in terms of being members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, on my mom's side of the family, I'm 6th generation Latter-day Saint, and on my dad's 5th, which is wild for North Carolina. Like that doesn't happen. And so my dad is an attorney. Both my parents went to UNC, so I come by that very honest. My dad, though, went to law school at a little private university called Campbell, the Campbell Camels. And I was already a child then, already had been birthed. And so I actually remember my dad's time in law school, which is kind of fun. And my mom went to UNC as well, and she was actually a North Carolina cheerleader. She cheered the year after Michael Jordan. And so we bleed North Carolina blue. We are.
So you mentioned your single. Is the North Carolina Tar Heels a question on the application to become Mr. Morgan Jones?
I have a boyfriend and he likes Duke, which is a point of contention sometimes, but that's fine. I always say, if you live outside of the state of North Carolina, you're probably a Duke fan. But if you are a North Carolinian, you pull for the Tar Heels.
Wow. All right. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, good luck.
As
good
my
luck with that
dad
relationship.
says, as my dad says, all of their players are from up north anyway.
Hey Morgan, what did faith look like in your house growing up?
My parents always had fairly involved church callings, so they were always, serving in different various church capacities. I remember when I was younger, my parents tended to get like youth callings. They're those kind of people. But then as I got older, my dad was the bishop in our ward for 8.5 years. And then, so
hold on.
I think,
Whoa. Back up. 8.5
Yeah.
years.
yeah,
That's a doozy right
yeah,
there.
that's what happens when you live in North Carolina.
That's right. And
It's a long-term engagement.
You got to
as it turns
baptize
out.
the next bishop.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You're in there until the next one gets baptized. So yeah, but I think with that, I was just telling somebody the other day that when I was a junior in high school, I think one thing that I loved about growing up in North Carolina and in the faith community that I belonged to is there weren't a lot of us. And so if you didn't show up to church on Sunday, multiple things were not going to get done. And I'm not saying just when you're an adult, I'm saying from like the time I was in middle school. And so my junior year of high school, I was called to be the primary chorister, meaning I led the children's music. And I look back on that, and I got that calling when as teenagers do, had some like kind of rough friend experiences. I think teenage girls tend to be pretty brutal. And I was just kind of struggling. I had like lost weight and I've never struggled with depression in my life, but if there was ever a time where I felt depressed, it was probably then. And then I got this calling, and it was like something that I looked forward to every week. And the day that I went away to college, I sobbed all day at church. And so I just think I had good examples in my parents of what service, not only in the church, but service to people around you, the difference that can make for you. And it really is like a selfish thing, because we get so much more than what we give. But I think in them, I saw that, and then actually had opportunities really early on to try it out for myself, and to have that kind of love for the Savior and for Heavenly Father, to have that like sink deep,
So first of all, I've had the opportunity to extend releases to people, right? And when those tears come, I always feel like, man, you should feel really good right now because you've done it the right way, right? Like that.
Yeah.
It's like, man, if you are that torn up, you've done something right. I love that. But can you talk about that for a second? Just you talked about some of the experiences that you had where you really felt the love of the Savior. When and what helped you establish faith as a power for yourself in your life, where it's not about mom and dad and their testimony, but it's about Morgan and her relationship with the Savior?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I should start by saying I think that I'm one of these people that always loved God. Like, I feel like that is a gift that I kind of came with.
Yeah.
Not that I haven't had like questions or, like I said, moments where I'm like, what's going on here? But I think even when I was little, like those were the things that I loved. And so I'll just start with that as the basis. But then I would say I always tell people, well, I shouldn't say I always tell people. I taught a Relief Society lesson one time in college. And one of the things that I talked about, and it's funny because there's this girl that I have seen from time to time since then. And every time that I see her, she's like, do you remember when you taught the Taylor Swift Relief Society lesson?
Oh man, I
Oh,
need to
my
hear this.
daughter is all ears.
Yeah, I've been listening to Taylor Swift for 19 years. That's all my teenage daughters listen
I know we all love her and we've all grown up with her, but she had this song at the time that had just come out called Never Grow Up. And in that song, you know, she talks about kind of moving out on her own and like that experience of, you know, spending the first night by yourself. And I talked to these girls, and I was a junior, senior at the time, and most of the girls in our ward were freshmen. And I just said, you know, this is the first time in your life where no one's waking you up for church on Sunday. And it's your choice whether or not you're going to get up and get ready. And it's all on you. And so that I think is like a pivotal moment in anybody's life. And then for me, like what has cemented. I don't know why I just said that way.
I thought it was because you're from North Carolina, so I was wrong with it. Yeah.
Well, there's probably plenty of things where you're like, why did you say that way? But I think since then, there have just been like a few things in my life that have made it so I've really had to rely on my faith more than I think I would have previous or otherwise.
Yeah.
So one example, I mean, I brought up being single. I think that has been one of the most formative things and has caused me, you know, to have questions that I've tried to take to the Lord, and also a lot of time spent by myself thinking about, you know, what kind of person do I want to be, and what does the gospel mean to me, and am I doing these things out of fear or guilt, or, you know, and realizing how much it actually means to me. And so I don't know. It's not like I can like pinpoint one moment, sure. But I will say, I think my faith has gotten progressively stronger out of necessity.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
When you need to understand the context that in which you're speaking, because Tyler recently just had his oldest daughter come home from a mission. And I've got one who is about to go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania mission. And so when you start talking Taylor Swift and Never Grow Up, you know, that does something to dads. It really does. And I mean, I've been in those situations where I've talked to kids, you know, who are ready to take off. And, you know, the thinking is I, as a dad, I love the story of Enos because I want my kid in that wilderness. I want my kid to wrestle. I want my kid to wonder, was dad onto something when he talked about how Jesus Christ brought him joy? Was dad and mom onto something when they established a marriage on the gospel of Jesus Christ? And it's only going to come in that wrestle.
Yeah.
It's only going to come so that they can stand on their own with that. And actually that, Tyler, I love that question that you asked, because that's actually becoming one of my favorite questions on the show. Is just, when does faith become a source of power and strength for you?
You know, it's interesting too, because I was in a youth in a meeting with a bunch of youth a few months back, pre-COVID, so we actually could be in a room together, right? And
those were the days.
Those were the days, man. Yeah, those were great. But we had some people get up and share testimonies, you know, and someone was saying, well, you know, I went through this in my life, and this is where I was at, and why I'm here. And someone said, well, I went through this, and they kind of shared these experiences. And someone else got up and they were like, gosh, you know, I did everything my mom asked me to do. I don't really have this hard experience, you know, that I could point to. But I believe, you know. And I got up and I was just, you know, I just felt like, look, we don't have to go through the hardest thing to gain a testimony of the Savior, right? I mean, that comes in a lot of different ways, and you know, and we're grateful for these people that stood and shared those experiences, because that's powerful, right? And that was their catalyst to make change. But just as powerful is the young man that stood up and said, gosh, I've been doing what my mom's asked me to do. And that's that, you know, and I believe. And I think sometimes like I go back to that point of we sell ourselves short a little bit, right? Well, maybe this person has greater faith in me because they've done A, B, and C, and I haven't experienced those things. I don't think that's the case. We have to be able to just look at our own relationship with the Savior and judge that on its own merit. I think if we can get there, we're in good space.
Well, I think I don't know if you guys watch or listen to Don't Miss This, but I am a big fan. And just this week,
no relation, just so you know, Mike Freeman, no relation to Emily.
No relation to EBF. So on this week's episode of that podcast, they talked about in Doctrine and Covenants section 7, where we read about John and Peter asking for different things of Christ. And it makes it sound like Jesus is saying that John wanted something greater. But then they talk about how, if you really look at it, what he was saying was he wanted something greater than what he had already done. And they say it much better than I am. But essentially that we make this mistake of comparing ourselves to other people, our desires or the things that we've done. And all John was saying was, I want to do something better. I'm not done yet. Yeah. You know, and I think that's the important thing, is like looking at ourselves as we're not done yet. And to your point, Tyler, I think everybody goes through hard things. It's just a matter of when your heart is.
Right. Yeah.
And you're gonna want to have that faith when the hard comes along. And so you might as well get a jump on it. But one of the best pieces of wisdom that has ever been shared with me, I was at a wedding dinner before one of my best friend's weddings, and I was talking to her future, soon to be the next day, sister-in-law. And she was saying how when she and her husband first got married, that they went through some marital problems and that they had to go to counseling, and they hadn't been married very long at all. And she said, and I was looking at all of these other couples around us, and they just seemed so happy. And I would talk to them and I could tell they were not going through the same problems that we were going through. And she said, I just felt so embarrassed and like crappy about myself. Yeah. And then she said, years passed, and all of those couples started going to therapy. Right. And she's like, and we were great by that point. Like we had worked through our problems.
Right. Yeah.
And so she's like, things happen in different time frames for different people. And you can't compare your marriage or your life or whatever to somebody else's, because the hard is going to come along at different times for different people. And so I just think it's important not to compare.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that point.
Well, I think life is hard. I think life is hard in the gospel. I think life is hard out of the gospel. And I tell my kids, choose your hard, right? It's all going to be hard. If you make those choices that are going to put you in the Lord's territory and you're qualified for his help,
right?
It's going to make it not easier,
a lot better.
Right. A lot better. Whereas if you don't, now you're on your own and it's hard.
Yeah.
And you don't have answers to questions, and you're losing light, right? Whatever talents you have, whatever light was given to you, now you're forfeiting that because you're yielding that, because that's what happens, right? We know that our adversary gains power through our disobedience. We give him our light.
Right.
Life out there is dark for all of us. Might as well be on the Lord's side and be in his territory so that we can have his light and have his help. You know, and when you were talking about being single and that challenge, I loved that little thing you said. And I don't even know if you realized you said it. Maybe you did, because I think you might be smarter than both of us, Tyler. But she said,
low bar, man. It's a low bar.
as I'm hanging out and I'm spending time by myself, I'm asking the question, what kind of person do I want to be? When we are in those moments of despair, we find hope and comfort by focusing on what we can control. So instead of sitting there thinking about that husband to be and what kind of person God's going to give you and what kind of this and what kind of that, that's all outside of your control, you can look at what kind of person you want to be, and that's the work that you can do.
Yeah.
And that's really the only work that you can do.
And I think that to that point that we want to make sure that if the right person were to come along, if somebody as great as we would like to have would come along and come into our lives, we want to make sure that we're somebody that they would like to be around as well. Yeah. And so I think it's so true. That's the one thing that you feel like you can control. And then you just, that I'd say there's two pieces. You can control who you're becoming, and you can control your relationship with God, which ultimately, even when you meet somebody, is going to be the most important relationship in your life. Yeah. And so if you've got those two things on lockdown, you can rest assured that when the time is right, and if that is God's plan for you, he's going to place somebody in your life, and that's outside of your control.
Well, I think of when Joseph Smith was going through his trials, and we're talking trials, right? I mean, I'm not comparing what you're going through maybe and what he went through, but the counsel that he received is appropriate for all of us. Hold on your way.
Yeah.
Right. You hold on to your covenants. You hold on to your place, and don't lose your place, because there is an enemy who would love to use life's inconveniences and challenges to move you out of your place. And then it's going to make things a whole lot worse. And you actually stumbled on one of the pillars of our show, is that everyone needs therapy.
You're not wrong.
When you're talking about that young couple, we're always talking about how, that's got a stigma. That word has a stigma. And if we can use our little megaphone here to kind of knock down that notion that, weak people need therapy. We all are complicated people. And we could benefit from having a trusted person with some skills and be able to give us some tools to work things out.
Amen.
Especially in married life, right?
I haven't even experienced that, but I'm still giving you a firm amen. So
how do you honor your parents today, Morgan?
I think that's such a good question. I really genuinely love my parents, and I think one of the biggest ways that I honor them is by trying to make them proud. But interestingly enough, one time back in college, I had a friend who asked me one time, he said, Morgan, when all the rest of us were still trying to figure things out, you didn't really seem like that was an issue for you. And he's like, why is that? And my immediate reaction was, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. And then later I was like, no, that's not true. That's not the reason. Like, I just never had any desire to do those things. And I think I didn't want to disappoint Heavenly Father. And so I do think like I want to be somebody that makes my parents proud, and I would never want to do anything to hurt them. But more than anything else, I want to be somebody that makes Heavenly Father proud. And I think conveniently, if I do that, then it will also make Frankie and Paula proud. So we'll see.
And you're a North Carolina fan, so that probably helps them too, right? I mean,
yes, I do. I honor my parents by rooting for the Target.
Is there anyone else looking? So at this opportunity, looking back, and we've given you some questions to think about prior to the show, put you in kind of a reflective mood. Is there anybody else that you would like to honor?
Yeah, I actually my answer to this question has changed over the course of this conversation, but I would say that my siblings are someone that I would like to honor. My siblings and I are all very different. We have very different personalities, different interests, and I just really admire the people that they are. And I admire the things that they're doing in their individual lives that I think are, in their own unique ways, efforts to figure out life and its purpose and their relationship to the divine. And I don't know, I just, my siblings are people that I really admire and respect, and am just super grateful. I feel like I was blessed to grow up in a family with such wonderful siblings, and
even the one that you tried to hit with a shoe.
Yes, and I talked about that in a speech at her wedding. So hopefully we've gotten that off hopefully that like scratches that from the record.
Right. Yeah.
But she's great.
Well, you know what? You talk about making your parents proud. I hope they have an opportunity to listen to this, because I can think as a dad, nothing would make me more proud than have my adult children praise their siblings.
Well, I genuinely mean it. And I'm like, I think that one thing that I love them for too is that they love me too, even though we're different. And I think that that's important as well. And we just like genuinely, anytime that we're together, we love spending time together. And so I think that's a gift.
Morgan, what gives you hope?
Oh, well, the Utah Jazz are playing really well right now.
Morgan, that's fleeting. All right. That's not going to last. I'm sorry.
No, I love this question. And that's on my mission. I became obsessed with hope. You can ask anybody that was my companion. They will tell you that I was like an absolute nutcase about the concept of hope. And so what gives me hope right now? I think I would say that I don't think we give the number of good people in the world enough credit. And I think it's easy to feel that way because we're like, all right, so these are our options for world leaders. You know, like I think that is a little bit frustrating for some people.
Right.
And creates this illusion that perhaps there are not as many good people in the world. And I just firmly reject that. And I think that there are so many good people in the world, and feel really grateful to be able to interact on a regular basis with different people that I just am amazed by their goodness and by their generosity. And so I would say good people give me hope.
I love that answer. I think that you're right. I mean, we're in a time where, you know, maybe just by what you see on the news every day, right? You become a little jaded, and you think, well, this is what we've got in the world.
Right.
I totally agree with you. I mean, there's people
like we're not scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
No, right.
And I think that's kind of, I think Satan would probably have us think that. Yeah. Have us think like, oh, we're on our last leg, the last good people left standing. And I just think there's tons.
Yep. I totally agree with you. I love that.
You know, Tyler, last time we got together with Carol Wirtz, we were talking about small town dairy farm, Michigan, back a while, and how rich that sense of community was. You know, listening to Morgan's comment about good people bringing her hope, I've been thinking about the power of community. I came across something. I was in a training or something, and I read that whatever the problem, community is the answer. And I really believe that. And I think that, Morgan, your comment about Satan would have us think differently. I think that that's intentional. I think there is an intentional design to divide us. There is an intentional design to make us feel isolated, make us feel like we are alone. And I think that the work that you're doing with your podcast and the work that, and the conversations that we're having on our podcast are just opening our eyes to the ideas of others, right? And
it goes back to that idea, Mike, too, that we talked about earlier, that we're all more alike than we are different, right? And I think that's that's key. If we can get to that point where we're willing to understand each other and just look at each other for who we really are, I mean, life becomes a lot more tolerable,
Yeah.
Because people are good, and people are fun, and people are are interesting, and I think that maybe that's hard to remember when you're in rush hour traffic on I-5, but but for the most part, they're good, right?
And we tend to look at things kind of like a binary world, right? That person's good, this person's bad. But back to that, one of those original quotes that you shared, Tyler, it's like, it's not about the polarity. It's about the journey. It's about where did that person start? We've had people come on the show and talk to us about life, and they'll start with a disclaimer almost. And they'll say, I'm thinking of James Pascal, and it's like, look, I'm going to tell you about my parents. This is where they started.
Yeah.
This isn't where they ended. Let me just start with where they started. And I think that how great is it that, like, look, let me tell you about Mike Freeman, not where he started. Yeah. Because where he started was a rough story. But the idea is that we're all work in progress, and we need each other. We need that community.
Yeah.
Mike, the podcast host in me really, really wants to know how you came in contact with the church, but I'll just wait until later.
That's a wild thing. I can tell you, basketball was involved.
Okay.
I can tell you, interesting journey that I really, really hope. You talked about 5 and 6 generations removed from the church, or 5 and 6 generations deep in the church in your family. It's my prayer that 5 or 6 generations from now, my kid, those people will be telling the story of how Mike Freeman joined the church. Really means a lot. You talk about hinge moments. We talk to people about hinge moments all the time. And you've alluded to a couple, going to that professor and saying, hey, do you take on interns? Imagine what your life would be like if that moment doesn't happen.
Right.
I play those games all the time with my mind, right? Almost like choose your own adventure. If I don't have this, I'm not a member of the church without 5 conversations, period. And if you took those 5 conversations and you added them up, they might have been like 7 minutes long total, Wow. But it was a moment of being in a place where somebody says something and nothing is the same. And, I think a lot of people think of their lives on tracks. And, Tyler and I have learned through this that you hold the keys and there's no track. You can get off that track at any time and you can say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. In my story, I can point to a moment. I'm in college. I'm in a hot tub. There's all kinds of crazy happening. And I say out loud, I'm sitting there and I'm looking around at all this stuff, and the words of my mom are in my head. And my mom's not a member of the church, but my mom told me I can do anything, I can be anything. And I'm looking around and I'm going nowhere fast. And I say out loud, I got to get off this train. And everyone around me turns to me like I've lost my brains, right? I said, I got to get off this train. I got to make a change. And they all convinced me to forget that and push it under, when that beach ball pops up, you push it under and you keep doing what you're doing. But yeah, that was kind of the beginning of some changes. So.
Well, I want to hear that whole story, but I won't derail the whole podcast in the interest of hearing it.
Well, hey, I am a huge sports fan. Tyler and I both, and your boy Donovan Mitchell is about as good as they come. He seems to be a class
act.
Isn't
he so good?
My son follows him. My son borderline worships him on social media. But he'll tell me that guy just drops in on backyard barbecues.
Yeah.
He'll be like 4th of July, who's having a party, and he'll just show up in people's backyards. So, I mean, he seems to be a humble kid. Good luck to the Utah Jazz. And it's exciting to see guys like that, right?
Yeah.
Doing it the right way.
For sure.
I will not compliment the Tar Heel basketball.
That's okay. Program. The Tar Heels are really not that good this year. So
I won't compliment. You've got quite a football program there. I won't touch it.
Okay. Right? That's all right. We're not offended.
I thought we weren't going to, but you kind of broke that truce.
But Mac is back. So that's all I'm going to say.
So Morgan, you are a fan of It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
And
whoa. Hold up.
Yeah.
Tyler, I don't know. You're not going to that.
I'm going wherever I want to go.
Oh, I know, but like we have Morgan Jones, who's the host of a podcast called All In.
I'm going to give you the honors, Mike.
Can I?
Yeah. He's been talking about this for weeks. Right. So here we go.
Morgan Jones, we have talked a little bit about how much we appreciate and how much your work influences our work. Back in the very beginning of this work, we sat down and said, let's do this. What podcasts do we admire? All In was top of the list. And we love how you end your show with that question, with that same question. So I'm going to do the honors and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a piece of your own medicine, right?
Yeah.
So Morgan Jones, what does it mean to you to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Such a good question. No, I'm just kidding. I actually can't take credit for that question. It was not my idea. I don't know who came up with it. It was like one of those times where you're just like riffing off of each other's ideas and none of us know who came up with it, but I'm fairly certain it was not me. I have a really hard time answering this question. And I always tell people that the reason is when other people come in to record their episode, it's on any given day. On that day, what does it mean to you to be all in? And for me, it's always in the back of my mind, but I'm not actually having to answer it verbally. So I'm actually really grateful for the chance to answer it and have like a timeline that I need to give you an answer. I think that there are a lot of different ways to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that was one of the things early on. We wanted to make sure that there wasn't a prescriptive one way to be all in. And so I've loved the fact that, and I should say this, I had in my mind like a certain answer initially. And that answer has changed over and over and over again. And one of the reasons is because everybody's answers have been totally different. But I think for me right now, one thing that's been on my mind a lot is, and this is going to sound so bad, but I gave a talk a little while ago, and I know nothing about poker. So let me be clear about that. But
disclaimer.
I started doing some research because I knew that all in was a term in poker. Mm-hmm. And I found this article where it talked about it. And it says, in the game of poker, all in refers to the moment when a player, whether out of bravado, recklessness, or desperation, bets all of his or her chips on a single hand. The all-in moment in poker is a thrilling win or lose everything crisis of dramatic clarity. You've wagered all you've got, giving your fate over to the cards, and you can't go back out again. Going all in is often a spectacularly bad idea, but in life, it seems it is all good. The only way to live boldly is to be all in on many different things at once. And so for me, like, if you break that down, it really actually describes what I think it means to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ. You're giving all that you have, all your chips are on the table. And the way that we do that is by making promises with God. And then once you've gone all in, you can't go back out. It's like that Elder Holland talk where he talks about, when you raise your hand to the square in the baptismal font and you said, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, that commission was to have changed your convert forever, but it was surely supposed to have changed you forever as well. So I just think you can't go back out. And then I think that the one big difference between poker, which I do not recommend based on this description, I've never played again, but the one big difference is that we're betting on somebody whose hand we can always trust. And so for me, it's kind of like, just that putting it all on the line and betting on his hand, knowing that his hand never lets us down.
Yeah.
And he's the only hand
that will never let us down. Yeah.
Well, she kind of crushed that, Tyler. What do you think?
Yeah, geez, that was great, man. I was just wondering what the research was like to figure out what poker, what all in on a poker hand looked like. But that was fantastic. I love that, Morgan. Thank you.
Well, when I gave the talk where I talked about that, I'm pretty sure my boyfriend was like, "You have gone off the deep end. You're talking about poker in a talk."
Those playing cards.
Yeah.
Well, we've loved the time that we've been able to spend with you, Morgan. I mean, it's been a ton of fun, and we really appreciate the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And to, Mike has kept his cool. I've
actually been really good.
He's been really good. I mean, when we did the pre-show call with you afterward, he said, "How did I do?" And I said, "You did all right, man. You acted like you've been there before. Good job. Good job." So,
well, in the words of the Chick-fil-A employees, it's been my pleasure.
Well, listen, we end our show the same way every time. And we're all fans of George Bailey and of It's a Wonderful Life, and the journey that George Bailey was on in discovering the rich life that he lived. What does it mean to you, Morgan, to be considered one of the richest women in town?
So I am really grateful for the chance to think about this. And I just heard someone speak the other day. My boyfriend's dad gave a talk, and he was saying how his father had given some advice and had said that you can achieve all the success in the world, but the thing that is going to make your life fulfilling and meaningful are the rich personal relationships that you have. And so I think that's what George Bailey finds, right? At the end of the movie, when he's standing there and all these different people from different facets of his life are coming in to give money because they know that his family's in need. I think he realizes that it has nothing to do with the money that's being put in that, whatever it was. My favorite side note, my favorite part, one of my favorite lines in all of It's a Wonderful Life is the lady that walks in and says, "I've been saving up for a divorce if ever I gets me a husband." So my family likes to make jokes about that. But I think that the thing that makes life rich and makes us rich as human beings are the relationships that we've built in our lives. And one of those relationships being a relationship with God, like I talked about before, I think making that relationship paramount. But then there are tons of other relationships that we have. And, you start at those that are most significant, that being our family and then our friends, but then even like acquaintances that we have the opportunity to impact their life in the smallest little ways. And one of my favorite quotes is by Richard Paul Evans, and it's from one of the books from his The Walk series. And I will probably butcher it, but it says something like, there are people waiting for my journey to cross with theirs. I don't know who they are or where they are, but I know for certain that they are waiting. And so I think it's those little relationships that make us rich in our lives and that's what's going to matter in the long run. It's one of the only things we can take with us. So,
yeah. Thanks, Morgan. I love that answer. Mike, one of the things that I love is this idea, it's like the recurring theme. And when we talk to people, there's a lot of things that come up, but this idea of relationships and sometimes we think that we have these small interactions that seem meaningless, but the opportunity for those things to change the course of our lives is huge. There's going to be one thing that I think I can speak for Mike here that we've found with this podcast is that the messages that we receive from people in listening to other people's journeys is impactful. And I know that tonight, some of the things that we discussed for me border on sacred conversations about relationships with our Heavenly Father, places that we've been, experiences that we had, getting an internship at the newspaper, right? I mean, that seem almost innocuous, but they become pivotal moments. And I think there's going to be people that listen to this when this airs and recognize those moments in their own lives. And so I appreciate what you shared tonight, because it's had an impact on me, and it will certainly have an impact on others.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think as you're letting us in on your life, Morgan, we're thinking about those things. We're thinking about those moments in our own life. And I think that I love your answer. Not fair to drop a quote like that and then walk away. That's kind of messed up, but we'll let that slide.
Isn't that so good though? And
that's
I think
a powerful quote.
Coming back though, Mike, to what you were saying about how you had a handful of conversations and that they probably lasted a very small number of minutes. I think that's a perfect example of that, right? And that everything in your life hinges on these choices that other people made, and that's made your life rich. And I'm sure that if they knew the impact that it's had on you, it would make their life rich. And so yeah, I don't know. I think that being rich in those relationships and even in those small interactions, it's amazing what it does for your soul. Yeah. And how those things, like something so small, can leave you feeling so good for a good amount of time and be just so rewarding. Whereas other things that we think are going to bring happiness and joy tend to fall flat.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that the magic of the thing you shared there is your answer is the realization. Everybody's got relationships. Everybody has these moments. I think that having the presence of mind to realize, because that's the beauty of George Bailey. He realizes it. He's in a situation where he's able to learn the power of the relationships that he has in his life. And I think we unlock the richness in our life when we realize that.
Yeah.
When we realize that even the mundane,
right,
even the siblings, even the people that we spend the most time with in our lives, some of those people we treat the worst.
Yeah.
Right. And to realize that the relationships are really what makes us rich. Because the sad thing is to be at the end and realize it.
Yeah. Well, and to tie my podcast to your podcast, I think that it's interesting how our relationships change when we choose to be all in them. Yeah. And so whether it's being all in the gospel of Jesus Christ, or all in our relationship with God, or all in a marriage, or all in as a sister, like that's when the relationship really has the ability to change. And even those little small interactions, when you're all in with somebody in a moment, it changes everything. So, yeah.
And letting that fear, casting that fear aside.
Right.
Because the human in you says, don't trust that person with everything you got, because they're going to let you down. Yeah, they are. But we've got a safety net called Jesus Christ. And I think with that, with him backing your play, so to speak, I think we have the liberty to go all in.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, I've loved the time, Morgan, and I know our listeners will as well. And I really do appreciate you reaching out to a couple guys who are starting something.
Well,
right? I don't know what you thought when we reach out to you and say, hey, we got this thing. We're a couple guys over here. What do you think? But we really are glad that you jumped on board.
Well, like I said, it's been a treat. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Morgan. And we'll do it again. We'll leave North Carolina out of it this time, right? We'll wipe the slate clean and we'll do it again. But we
cannot commit to leaving Duke out of it.
I do feel like we kind of bonded though over Donovan Mitchell, so I think we can call it good.
Things are good.
Donovan Mitchell bringing people together. Look at that. Bringing Duke and North Carolina together to the table of brotherhood. Look at that.
If that can happen, anything is possible, right?
That's right. And that is our message to you tonight.
That's right. Thanks, Morgan. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.